coming rushing down. But
Wow.
in the whole time I've been here, no one has seen those rocks like that. So, yeah.
Interesting. The latest thing that's happened in my little neighborhood up the hill in Hollowell is somebody got a rooster.
Oh no.
And I have to tell you, it's quite a vociferous rooster. So I don't really care because I sleep with the biggest fan and, like a restaurant fan on, but my neighbors care. And it's been so fascinating to hear people talk about the rooster.
Well, Charlotte, I happen to be somewhat of an expert on the chicken ordinance in Guilford. So you might want to check out the chicken ordinance in Guilford if you are interested in helping your neighbors figure out what to do about this rooster. Because frankly, I know a lot about it because our granddaughter loves chickens and it's been a big to-do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you really don't want to have to reinvent it. It's a very long and articulated ordinance, which I have read my own self.
Actually, one of my favorite memories of being a city councilor is I was on the committee that created our chicken having ordinance in Hollowell.
Uh-huh.
But I've not told anyone that so that I could I've just been watching the discussion happen. Yeah. It's one of the cases where I don't have to solve it. So I've just been listening and, I don't watch a lot of TV, so I don't have a lot of that like Bravo drama that other people have, Real Housewives of whatever. So the rooster discussion has been quite entertaining for me.
Yeah. Listen, Charlotte, I just got my 87th draft of the prostitution bill back. So I'm going to send it to you today for signature if you're still willing.
I'm willing. That would be great.
It may not be perfect. There's a couple of things that I'm going to do with an amendment on it, but they're minor stuff. Neil Duffett had a suggestion about making sure you didn't have to advertise that you're trying to get expunged a prostitution charge, which would not be great if you had to publish that in the paper if you're trying to get rid of it. So anyway, but I'm going to send it out today finally, and I got to have it back relatively soon. I think Ann Carney is going to be the lead Senate co-sponsor for me.
Wonderful.
So, but I'll say anybody else that is willing, let me know, and I'll get it to you to look at. Or actually, I may just get it to you guys to look at, no matter what. So.
Wonderful.
I don't know why Bill Pluker looks like someone who might sign on my bill. I don't know what I didn't. The other funny thing.
Thumbs up.
Yeah. Who did?
Bill.
Oh, good. All right. I'm hoping that my goal this year is to get people to understand what I'm trying to do, because I failed miserably at that last 2 years ago. So I'm trying to get a fair amount of education done. And I don't think it's going to come to criminal justice this year. So that just FYI.
Judish.
I'm trying to get it to Judish, yeah.
Smart.
Although I got to tell you, the Judish Committee is...
I am going to just let you know, Representative, before we talk about the Judiciary Committee, that there are 24 attendees who are here.
All right, I won't do that then, yes.
Maybe we'll talk about that another time.
Well, it's an interesting committee. It's very different than last year. A lot of change.
Yeah. I hear the Republican members of the committee in the hall, so they should be joining us shortly.
Wonderful, okay. Thank you.
And my Wi-Fi's back. It's a miracle.
Oh, good. So for folks who are here, we're going to get started as quickly as we can. You probably know the rules that we are waiting for a quorum. And so when enough committee members join us, we'll get started. Oh, man. Senator, it looks like we might have a quorum.
Yep. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. So we're on YouTube now. We're all set?
No, we're not. I'll start it right now
Okay,
if we're
Thank
ready.
you. That's one reason I waited.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. This is the committee, Joint Standing Committee of Criminal Justice and Public Safety. And today is Monday, April 12th. And currently we are now on YouTube. And we've established, or I see that we do have a quorum. So I will have the members introduce themselves. Representative Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Charlotte Warren, and I represent the city of Hollowell and the towns of Manchester and West Gardner in the House.
Representative Pickett.
Good morning. My name is Dick Pickett. I represent House District 116, representing the towns of Canton, Dixfield, Hartford, Mexico, and Peru.
Thank you. Representative Reckett.
Thank you. My name is Lois Reckett, and I represent the ocean end of South Portland.
Representative Renicki.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm Shelley Rudnicki. I represent House District 108, which is Fairfield, Mercer, and Smithfield, and I am still here under protest because we adjourned sine die almost 2 weeks ago. Thank you.
Representative Pluker.
Thank you very much. I represent House District 95, which is Warren, Hope, Appleton, and part of Union.
Thank you. Representative Newman.
Good morning. I'm Representative Dan Newman, District 76, which is Belgrade, Rome, Mount Vernon, Fayette, Vienna, and Wayne.
Thank you. And Representative Luckner.
Hey, good morning. I'm Grayson Luckner. I represent District 37, which is part of Portland, out around the jet port.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Representative Costain.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. I represent District 100, which is part of Etna, Dixmont, Newport, Plymouth, and Corinna.
Thank you all. And I am Senator Susan DeChambeau from District 32, and that includes Dayton, Lyman, Alfred, Arundel, Kennebunkport, and Biddeford. So we've established there's a quorum. I will also introduce with us today is our policy analyst, Jane Overton, and our committee clerk, Deb Fahey is with us. Thank you. You will also notice in that box the LD 1278, and I've got to quiet my phone. We will have the number of the LD posted every time we move on to another hearing. Good morning, I should say again, and welcome to the Joint Standing Committee on Criminal Justice Public Safety. The committee is assembled electronically today for the purposes of inviting the public comment on legislation. Before we get started, I want to share some information related to the fact that this meeting is being conducted using an electronic format. The meeting is currently being live streamed on the committee's YouTube channel. This means that anyone who is a participant in the meeting via Zoom can be seen and also heard if their microphone is unmuted. People on the Zoom meeting waiting to testify cannot be seen or heard until they are called upon to speak. I will also tell you that this meeting will be recorded and available to view on the committee's YouTube channel soon after the meeting has concluded. I wish to advise you that I will recognize the sponsor of the bill. After testimony, members may ask questions of the sponsor. I will then ask if there's anyone in the public to raise their hand who is a representative and wishes to testify, as they also have other meetings that they must attend. Now, how each bill will be heard today. I will call upon the sponsors and co-sponsors to speak first. After the presentation by sponsors and co-sponsors, we will call on members of the public based on how they registered to testify. I will ask those who wish to speak for the bill, against the bill, or neither for nor against the bill. I will ask you to please state your name, your place of residence, and the organization you represent. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and a clock will be available. You will see the clock. And if you come close to going over or go over, we will give you a notice that you need to wrap up. Now, I will open the hearings for today. There's been an adjustment to the schedule. This morning, we have 3 bills. We will begin with LD 1278, followed by LD 12, and then lastly, LD 894. So the first bill we're going to hear, and the first sponsor is my co-chair, Representative Warren, on LD 1278. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Senator DeChambeau and esteemed members of the Joint Standing Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety. I'm here today to present LD 1278, an act to end the Maine Information and Analysis Center program. This bill is easy to understand. In fact, visually, it's just 2 pages of dollar figures wrapped in parentheses, and that means savings. This bill is aimed at not spending taxpayer dollars on Maine's Fusion Center, the Maine Information Analysis Center, or MIAC. Not spending $1.5 million to be precise. As we in this committee know, it is rare to see fiscal notes that only contain savings. Now, let me be clear. We must invest in public safety. We all want our communities and our state to be safe. We, the 13 of us together, have spent months on this very topic. But it is also our job to decide not to spend our constituents' hard-earned dollars on initiatives that are wasteful. Many of you were members of this committee last session when we, along with the Judiciary Committee, spent hours trying to ascertain what MIAC does to make Mainers safer. We got a long list of what MIAC doesn't do, but no metrics to measure its effectiveness. In July, after facing criticism for a lack of transparency, the MIAC opened its doors to reporters. I also attended the session, and when asked, quote, "What service does the center provide that other agencies don't already do?" Lieutenant Johnston deferred to the other agencies to answer the question. He said, and I quote, "I think that question is better asked of the people we partner with and we try to serve on a daily basis, the law enforcement agencies that utilize us, the public and private sector entities that we partner." To my way of thinking, recipients of Maine government funding better be able to prove to taxpayers that they're worth the money. If you are a public safety agency that cannot answer the question of how you create public safety, you should not receive government dollars. There also exists 3 other troubling words in Lieutenant Johnson's response. And those 3 words are private sector entities. Why are we using Maine citizens' hard-earned dollars to pay the Maine State Police to gather data on those citizens who are not committing crimes and report it to private sector corporate executives? As has been widely reported, State Trooper George Loader is suing the Maine Information and Analysis Center and its supervisors, claiming he was demoted after he told his bosses that the MIAC was illegally collecting and maintaining data, including a gun registry and information on citizens lawfully protesting, or said another way, expressing their First Amendment freedoms. Among other allegations, the Maine State Trooper says that the MIAC illegally gathered and kept information gleaned from social media about Maine citizens who legally protested against Central Maine Power Company's proposed transmission corridor. Shortly after those allegations came to light, there was a very large data breach that included in the trove of documents MIAC's email distribution list. Through the data breach, we learned that the MIAC sends intelligence reports to corporate executives and security officials at major corporations with interests or operations in Maine, including Avangrid, Central Maine Power's parent company. And I've listed a bunch of the others in my testimony: ExxonMobil, Bath Iron Works, Amerimaine, Smith & Wesson, Nestle Waters North America, and the list goes on. These private sector partners receive what's called, quote unquote, situational awareness reports. And in fact, in an August 28, 2018 situational awareness report that was also leaked, the MIAC detailed a case of, quote unquote, criminal mischief in the Forks, Maine, in protest of the New England Clean Energy Connect, NECEC project. The document shared to this large distribution list to law enforcement agencies and private sector corporate executives goes on further to ask law enforcement to report any information on the incident to the Maine Warden Service. Incidentally, the criminal mischief was described in the report as, and I quote from the Situational Awareness Bulletin, signs were hung on trees and on a wire suspended across a gorge that is used by local rafting companies. Paint stirring sticks with handwritten messages were also thrown into the gorge. Now, I'm a Pittston-born, farm-raised Mainer, so I have an inherent visceral distaste for any litter-bugging scofflaw. But criminal mischief? Hanging signs to communicate to whitewater rafters seems like First Amendment speech to me. Why are we billing Maine taxpayers to pay state police to collect information on Maine people who are not committing any crimes and then reporting that information to corporations? Is that really the role of our government? Would your constituents think that was a good use of their hard-earned dollars? Last summer, during our joint hearings with the Judiciary Committee, former Senator and now Maine Secretary of State Shenna Bellows asked Commissioner Sawchuk, and I quote, "What percentage of the Fusion Center time is being spent collecting information on groups that have never been involved in criminal activity?" Commissioner Sawchuk answered, and I quote, "I don't have specific percentages on their work product, We can try to drill down on that, unquote. I don't know about you, but I really wanted that answer to be an unequivocal 0%. We are spending 0% investigating people that don't commit crimes. I wanted Commissioner Sawchuk to tell the 26 lawmakers present and trying to get a handle on what MIAC does, that they do not spend time collecting and reporting data on my constituents who aren't involved in criminal activity. And I have a pretty good idea that that's what my constituents want as well. Maine lawmakers are not alone in their interest in our infusion centers. Under the leadership of former Republican Senator Tom Coburn, the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations spent 2 years examining federal support of fusion centers and evaluating the resulting counterterrorism intelligence. The subcommittee's investigation included interviewing dozens of current and former federal, state, and local officials, reviewing more than a year's worth of intelligence reporting from the fusion centers, conducting a nationwide survey of fusion centers, and examining thousands of pages of financial records and grant documentation. The subcommittee found, and I quote, "The fusion centers forwarded intelligence of uneven quality, oftentimes shoddy, rarely timely, sometimes endangering citizen civil liberties and Privacy Act protections, occasionally taken from already published public sources, and more often than not, unrelated to terrorism." I've included a link to the full report in my testimony. Committee colleagues, Maine government does not have an unlimited source of resources to spend. Every single dollar we approve in this committee better be spent toward improving our public safety. And there's a better way for us to show our constituents that we're spending our dollars wisely. We have many initiatives before us that need funding that have already proven their effectiveness. Among the many competing proposals for unlimited resources that we've discussed in the last few months are a new incinerator for marine flares, treatment for suffering Mainers, batterer intervention programming, crime lab investigators, and the list goes on. Let's choose together to spend taxpayer dollars on what we know works. I hope you'll join me in voting ought to pass on this important proposal. I appreciate your time this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have for me.
Thank you, Representative Warren. Any questions from members of the committee to Representative Warren? Good morning, Senator Lawrence. Could you introduce yourself first, please, and ask your question? Thank you.
Thank you. I am Senator Mark Lawrence from Southern York County, District 35, right along the New Hampshire border. I apologize, I was a couple of minutes late, so I missed the introductions. But I'm very interested in this bill, and I just kind of wanted to shape for the work session some of the things I would like to hear or look at when we do it, Representative Warren. I know gathering of intelligence and information for law enforcement is crucial. It's crucial in domestic violence situations, it's crucial in terrorism situations, and it's crucial they have a way to share it. You know, I know a number of law enforcement officers who have died because they did not know certain intelligence going into situations. And we did see the riot down in Washington and a lack of intelligence sharing. But I also understand your concerns, and because a lot of what you raise is around energy issues, it concerns me as chair of the Energy Utilities and Technology Committee. So I think what I'd be looking at is how do we give law enforcement those tools to gather information without infringing on First Amendment rights? And how is it shared among law enforcement in Maine? And is the ultimate question kind of how is that process supervised? Because I think that's one of the critical questions about when this information and intelligence is collected, that it be supervised on how it's administered, how it's distributed, and things like that. So part of me says, let's not throw everything out, but let's figure out how to properly supervise appropriate gathering of intelligence and information that can help law enforcement be safe and help the public be safe.
Thank you, Senator. I think those are great goals for us during the work session as well, is to look at those pieces. So thank you for bringing that up.
And I'd be interested to see what other states do,
Yes.
as well as the federal government. That would be very critical. I think of, that person who was arrested in the riot down in Washington, we found had been stalking Senator Pingree, had been stalking a state representative, and that information just wasn't shared and didn't come together. And that's a very critical piece.
And I think that also brings up some of my concerns as well. We are spending a considerable amount of money on fusion centers across the country. Many of us, because we pay attention to the news, we knew something big was coming on that day. Why didn't that information get there? Why are we spending so much money and time talking about fusion centers as this way to protect public safety, but it didn't happen? And why was there information that many of us had that didn't seem to be sent to the proper people? So, that is a great goal of figuring out if the mission is to better share information between law enforcement agencies. We don't have it. We don't have it. We got a really pretty good example of that. So I think it's a great goal, figuring out how we solve that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Representative Warren? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I would ask if there are any legislators in the waiting room that would like to speak on this bill. Please raise your hand and we'll let you in.
I see two. Well, I see three hands up, but I'm not. Okay, three hands.
Madam Speaker, if it is possible, I do know that Senator Bennett is testifying on numerous bills this morning. So if you would allow him to go first, that would be great.
Of course, he's a colleague. We'll go first. So I have here, and I will recognize Senator Bennett, followed by Representative Evangelos, and then Representative Andrews. Welcome, Senator Bennett. You have a question? Or a statement, I should say. And be mindful of the clock for all of you.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me okay right now?
Yeah, you may.
Very good. Thank you, Senator Deschambault and Representative Warren and esteemed members of the Joint Standing Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety. I'm Rick Bennett from Oxford. I have the honor of representing 13 towns in the beautiful Lake region and foothills of Western Maine, and I'm here as a co-sponsor of this bill. One of 80 fusion centers around the country, the Maine Information Analysis Center program, as you know, was established by Governor Baldacci way back in 2006 with an executive order. According to the Bangor Daily News, as Representative Warren pointed out, a U.S. Senate investigation co-chaired by Senator Tom Coburn found that fusion centers across the country are incompetent and mismanaged. The Senate could not find any fusion center reporting which uncovered a terrorist threat or any contribution such fusion center reporting made to disrupt an active terrorist plot. It did, however, find a chronic over-reporting of dubious information, misappropriation of funds, and accounting mechanisms so lax that the Department of Homeland Security could not tell Congress how much money they've invested in fusion centers. Fusion centers are owned and operated by state and local entities and are designated by the governor of their state. Governor Baldacci's executive order established hours. However, the center's website does not contain any information regarding the board or its meeting minutes prior to 2019. From the days of its origins, the Maine Fusion Center has lacked the oversight, transparency, and proper accountability of a public agency. It initially had a 3-member advisory board to counsel on civil rights and privacy concerns. The board consisted of Attorney Charles Ledbetter, former Chief Justice Dan Wathen, State Chamber of Commerce Chief Dana Connors. The latter might seem an odd choice, but Mr. Connors' membership evidenced from the outset the cryptic relationship this intelligence gathering agency has had with the largest corporations in Maine. But even such an advisory board turned out to be a thin veneer of false accountability. By 2015, former Chief Justice Wathen told the newspaper that it had been years since the board had met and tried to evaluate the center's activities. He said, quote, "It was rather hard to get your hands around what they were actually doing." The same newspaper article reported that MIAC's activities in Maine are largely covert. The agency is overseen by the Maine State Police, but its budget, the information it collects, and the exact makeup of its 12-member staff are not publicly disclosed. Notwithstanding that, its members insisted the agency was not as spooky as it seemed. We just needed to take their word for it. In late 2019, 13 years after its founding, the agency finally created bylaws for their advisory board, listed its members on its website, and posted meeting minutes. Bizarrely, the number of listed members is 12, but the bylaws posted immediately before the roster only authorizes 11 members. Until recently, the membership included the head of security for CMP, but his name quietly disappeared some months ago. I won't get into the lawsuit that Representative Warren mentioned by Trooper Loader, except to say that he alleged that the center shared some of this information with Central Maine Power. When he questioned the practice internally, he was allegedly demoted and transferred. It also revealed something of importance to my constituents. MIAC was gathering information on the staff and counselors of the Seeds of Peace summer camp in my district.
Please wrap up, Senator Bennett.
I will. Seeds of Peace, I think it's very important you know about this detail. The Seeds of Peace camp offers children in conflict-ridden parts of the world an opportunity to escape to Maine to find tranquility and a hope of reconciliation. I'd please ask you to review my written testimony regarding that. Finally, I would just simply say this intelligence gathering agency of state government, founded explicitly as one node in a national web of spy agencies, brazenly embraces secrecy and opacity and cozy relationships with multinational corporations. And even after facing searing questions from this committee, its leadership believes itself immune from justification, public scrutiny, and legislative oversight. If we cannot hold such a government agency accountable, God help our republic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Character work.
I'll recognize Representative Evangelos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Senator DeChambeau, Representative Warren, and other distinguished members of the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee.
Excuse me, what about questions for Senator Bennett?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I was more focused on the clock, I guess. And I apologize, Representative Evangelos. Representative Pickett, yes. You have questions?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Senator Bennett, nice
Morning.
to see you here this morning testifying.
Thank you.
I noticed that you spoke about the, in 2012, the U.S. Senate investigation on the fusion centers across the country. I guess my question would simply be this. That was 9 years ago. So in 9 years' time, I'm sure a lot of things have changed like they have in the way our life is, and the way things are going right now in our country and in our state. And so in that respect, have you been able to locate or have you looked for any other updated investigation or anything into the fusion centers to see if they have progressed and the information that they're giving has been very useful in some of the types of things that we believe it is being used for? or are you basically, is the only information you have on them based on the 2012 investigation?
Thank you, Representative Pickett. It's good to see you too. I could not find any formal investigation or research done in their effectiveness to date. I did have a conversation with a member of the administration who is familiar with the Fusion Center in Maine. And, honestly, it's one of these difficult things that it's hard to show a negative, right? So if the fusion centers are contributing to counterterrorism, for example, and something bad doesn't happen, it's sometimes hard to show that who was responsible for helping ensure that didn't happen. So I acknowledge that. However, I focus on this other part of the mission, which relates to law enforcement, and you're probably more equipped than I am to talk about that. But I am concerned that there seems to be a classic issue of mission creep with this agency. And that, coupled with the horrible governance and the lack of transparency and the opacity and the relationships with the largest corporations in our state, gives me pause. I mean, it's one of the reasons, frankly, that this agency has been called Orwellian.
Well, the only, and I certainly appreciate that, Senator. Thank you very much. And the only thing I would say is, in my encounters with and dealings with the Fusion Center in my time in law enforcement, especially in years that I was the chief of police in the town, I found their information to be very helpful. Their information they gave out not only was able for us to be able to have and be aware of certain things that may or may not be going to be happening, but it was really enlightening to me that they were able to let us know that the Route 2 corridor, which is our corridor from east to west in the state, is a state that's traveled by often traveled by, I should say, a Russian mob people. So that's kind of interesting to know what's going on and to be, and that's just one of the many things that I've been able to find out over the years through that. So I just wanted to know, I hope you would agree that in 9 years' time, since this investigation, that if we were to do another investigation today, the results would probably be much different, maybe either way, maybe worse or maybe better, but it probably would be a different a different result in the investigation.
Thank you. And just bear in mind that was a federal investigation. I'm focused mainly on MIAC and what does it do for Maine people. And I'm really particularly troubled that even under the examination by this committee last year, they seemed immune from justifying their relevance, their effectiveness, and couldn't actually answer this committee's questions, pointed questions in that area. And to my understanding, didn't follow up with the data that was requested. Maybe you received it. I didn't see it in the public record. But that's the sort of issue I have is look, we need to fight against terrorism. This agency has, with its shrouds of secrecy and lack of accountability, I think has questioned whether they are the proper agency to do the job. And I think we have to be very mindful in today's world of the concerns of the public with respect to our public agencies and whether they're actually, contributing to the problem of lack of confidence or helping. And this one, to me, seems like it's contributing to the problem.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Representative Pickett.
Any other questions? I will ask any other questions of Senator Bennett. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
Representative Evangelos, I've asked Ms. Fahey if we can restart the clock for you.
Senator DeChambeau, we don't usually use a clock on legislators. I'm wondering why we're choosing to do that today.
Well, because frankly, we probably haven't had too many legislators that I'm sorry, if that truly is.
I just was surprised because it's not something we usually do for legislators, but if
well,
you want to.
Thank you for bringing it to my attention. and I will let the legislators speak. So we will continue. I think Senator Bennett concluded after I asked him to wrap up, but I believe he was towards his end, if not the end. Maybe we should, but we will continue. If that was a precedent on my part, I apologize, Representative Warren. The subject matter is not something that influenced my use of the clock. However, so we will talk with or hear from Representative Evangelos. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning, Senator DeChambeau, Representative Warren, and other distinguished members of the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. I am Representative Jeffrey Evangelos from Friendship, and I represent House District 91. I am speaking today in support of LD 1278, an act to end the Maine Information and Analysis Center program. As the summary indicates, this bill terminates the Maine Information and Analysis Center, also known as the Fusion Center. Enactment of this bill will save the state approximately $1 million per year, but money is not at the center of my concern about the operation of the Fusion Center. Our remarkable political philosopher and second president, John Adams, once said, and I quote, "Liberty cannot be preserved without a general knowledge amongst the people, who have a right from the frame of their nature to knowledge, as their great creator, who does nothing in vain, has given them understandings and a desire to know. But besides this, they have a right, an indisputable, unalienable, indefeasible, defined right to that most dreaded and envied kind of knowledge. I mean," Adams said, "of the characters and conduct of their rulers." Therein lies the reason why I support Representative Warren's effort and why I co-sponsored this critical legislation in a period today when criminal justice and police reform are sweeping the nation. As you heard from Senator Bennett, the fusion centers were established in each state after the tragic attacks of 9/11 to gather investigative and intelligence information about possible terrorism attacks against our country. In testimony last summer before the Joint Committee of Criminal Justice and Judiciary, Commissioner Sawchuk admitted that the Fusion Center was no longer primarily serving in this capacity. Legislators probing the activities of the Fusion Center discovered that mission creep had overtaken the agency. We were told that the Fusion Center began tracking motorcycle gangs several years after 9/11 occurred. Then, in stunning revelations from a courageous state police officer who was forced to seek whistleblower protections against his employer, the Maine State Police, we learned that the Fusion Center had morphed into a secret police organization, which had turned against the constitutional rights of our own people. When confronted by these allegations, Commissioner Sawchuk refused to candidly answer questions from legislators. Legislators learned that the Maine Information and Analysis Center program began unconstitutional probes into constitutionally protected activities guaranteed under the First Amendment, including the right to peaceably assemble to seek redress of grievances. We learned that the Fusion Center began spying on peace and justice groups who were simply seeking an end to wars and armed conflicts. We learned that the Fusion Center was spying on people in Maine who were lawfully protesting against the power line construction in Western Maine to Massachusetts. We learned that the Fusion Center was collecting information about people who were lawfully exercising their Second Amendment rights, the right to purchase and own a firearm. Legislators also learned that the state police and Fusion Center are utilizing facial recognition technologies and cell phone intercepts without obtaining warrants required under the Fourth Amendment of our Constitution. Incredibly, we learned that the Fusion Center was collecting information on counselors and staff at the Seeds of Peace, a summer camp in Otisfield created in 1993 when the late foreign news correspondent John Wallach brought a group of Israeli and Arab teens together in a bid to end the cycle of violence in Palestine and Israel. According to Brendan McQuaid, a professor of criminology at the University of Southern Maine, the Fusion Center has morphed into an overdeveloped mass surveillance apparatus. For all of those above reasons, I support ending the Fusion Center and ending the constitutionally prohibited activities engaged in by the Maine State Police. President John Adams would be turning over in his grave if he knew that the Bill of Rights he fought for was in such peril here in Maine. Thank you for your consideration. I have attached various documentation for your review, and I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Representative Evangelos. Any questions for Representative Evangelos?
How did I do on the 3 minutes, Senator?
5, go ahead. I feel like I'm watching a basketball game here. Okay. Representative Pickett.
Yes, it's not a question, Senator, but I'm looking in online and I do not see Representative Evangelos' testimony. Will he be submitting that so that we'll be able to get a copy through there? Because I do not have a copy of it and I'd like to have it.
Thank you for the question.
Yes, Representative Pickett, I did submit it to Deb Fahey, and she wrote me and said it would be submitted into the system. I sent it this morning at about 6 a.m.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any questions of Representative? Please lower your hand, Representative Pickett. I don't see any questions. Thank you very much, Representative Evangelos. And now I will recognize, are you still here, Representative Andrews? Thank you. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Senator DeChambeau, Representative Warren, Justice Committee. Good morning. My name is John Andrews, and I represent Buckfield, Hebron, and Paris in District 73, located in the foothills of Western Maine. I'm here today to speak as a co-sponsor on LD 1278, an act to end the Maine Information and Analysis Center program. Thought crime was not a thing that could ever be concealed forever. You might dodge successfully for a while, even for years, but sooner or later, they were bound to get you. That's from George Orwell's seminal book, 1984. The year may be 2021, but we continue to find ourselves moving towards a perpetual Orwellian 1984. The Maine Information and Analysis Center is evidence of that. Americans were not meant to live in a cage, bound by their own government to only exist to pay taxes and be spied upon in the name of security. The Bill of Rights restricts government power and its endless quest for expansion. In fact, the First, Third, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments all protect Americans' inherent right to privacy. Furthermore, the Ninth Amendment doubles down on Americans' right to privacy, even outside of the Constitution. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Americans' right to privacy are explicitly clear and fundamental. They always have been, and that has not changed. Having a state-run mass surveillance operations center whose activities can neither be confirmed nor denied is a danger to all of our civil rights. We must push back and keep government power in check. We do not need illegal databases of law-abiding gun owners or secret data collection of citizens living within the law. Security should never be weaponized against American citizens. It must never be a binary choice between liberty or security. Because if it is, then we will have neither. Federal, state, and local agencies working together to amass surveillance, data mine, and track social media traffic against unaware and lawful citizens is wrong, illegal, and dangerously close to the "you show me the man, I'll show you the crime" of the dark days of Stalinism. On top of that, why is the Maine Information and Analysis Center feeding this intelligence to corporations and their executives? Especially when that intelligence, oftentimes legally collected, is on potential political opponents. Opponents who are exercising their First Amendment freedoms of association and free speech, only to have them usurped by the omnipotent surveillance state. The Maine Information and Analysis Center is an illegal espionage Frankenstein sewn together from top-down governmental intelligence agencies that operate unbound. This monster should never have been brought to life. No, I realize I will probably be on a no-fly list for the rest of my life and can expect an IRS audit after this testimony. But it's the right thing to do because fusion centers are the wrong thing for free people in a constitutional republic. This is especially true of MIAC in the state of Maine. I urge you to please protect our sacred liberty, privacy, and American birthright to be secure in our persons, houses, papers, effects, and against unreasonable searches. Please vote ought to pass on this landmark bill. Thank you for your time and commitment to public service. I believe you're on mute, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Representative Andrews. Any questions of Representative Andrews? Seeing none, thank you again.
Thank you, Committee.
We've been joined by Representative Rachel Talbot Ross. If you wish to speak, Representative Talbot Ross, welcome.
Thank you very, very much. Senator DeChambeau, Representative Warren, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety. My name is Rachel Talbot Ross, and I represent House District 40, which is part of Portland. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of LD 1278. As you have heard from the bill's sponsor and several of my colleagues who've already spoken, fusion centers do not make us safe. They compromise our basic rights and threaten our democracy. The Maine Information and Analysis Center is an inappropriate use of taxpayer dollars and should be shut down. As you have also heard from Senator Bennett, in 2012, the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations released a critical report on fusion centers. After reviewing 13 months of fusion center reporting, investigators concluded that fusion centers produced intelligence of uneven quality, oftentimes shoddy, rarely timely, sometimes endangering citizens, civil liberties, and the Privacy Act protections, occasionally taken from already published public sources, and more often than not, unrelated to terrorism. They could not identify any reporting which uncovered a terrorist threat or any contribution such fusion center reporting made to disrupt an active terrorist plot. I believe Representative Warren replied to this in an earlier question. The Senate did, however, find a cumbersome review process that delayed the dissemination of intelligence products, misinformation of funds, misappropriation of funds, accounting mechanisms so lax that the Department of Homeland Security could not tell Congress how much money they've invested in fusion centers, where estimates range from $289 million to $1.4 billion, and a chronic over-reporting of questionable information. After this scathing report, the Conservative Heritage Foundation concluded that more than half of existing fusion centers should be closed. The problems that the Senate identified 9 years ago are still on display, including here in Maine. Last summer, hacked MIAC documents published by a transparency collective showed that the MIAC had monitored Black Lives Matter protests in Maine. MIAC analysis shared unsubstantiated social media rumors to depict the protesters as violent and dangerous. They cited an obviously satirical website to support their claims that there may be paid protesters at the demonstrations. It was a staggering display of bias and unprofessionalism, but unfortunately, an all too common occurrence. Police bias is a major problem. And fusion centers exasperate it. In the days leading up to the Capitol riot in January of this year, some fusion centers did warn about the threat of violence, but both DHS and the FBI failed to act, claiming they lacked information on specific or credible threats. The hesitant response was a stark contrast to previous fusion centers reporting on Occupy Wall Street, environmentalist and anti-pipeline demonstrations, immigrant advocates, and Black Lives Matter. This threat inflation has real consequences. During the protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline and last summer's racial justice demonstrations, Fusion Center intelligence provided the backdrop for an excessive law enforcement response characterized by indiscriminate force. On June 2nd, 2020, while the MIAC was laundering right-wing conspiracy theories as intelligence and sharing them with law enforcement across the state of Maine, police fired tear gas at racial justice protesters demonstrating in Portland. The incident was so excessive and egregious that the city of Portland hired outside auditors to review police use of force in response to the demonstration. The city of Portland took action. In short, police surveillance is not just an abstract issue of civil liberties and privacy. The fact of surveillance is an affront to our democracy. Fusion centers have monitored every major social movement in the past 2 decades. They present constitutionally protected politically activity as dangerous extremism and encourage violent crackdowns on people exercising their rights. Closing fusion centers would have no negative impact on public safety. It would end an ineffective program that has done more to violate constitutional rights than protect them. And as you've seen through this bill, we will save money and we will still uphold public safety by the passage of this very important bill. I hope that you will join me and the sponsor and my colleagues in passing this bill. Thank you very much.
Any questions of Representative Talbot Ross? I do have a question, and thank you. A few of you have mentioned that report of 2012. I have not seen that U.S. Congress report, and that there was a statement there, or a recommendation, or a statement, I should say, that more than half should be closed. That was 9 years ago. And I'm sure that's been made available to every state in the union. Are there any MIACs or any fusion centers that have been closed in the US?
Senator, I thank you for the question. I do not have the answer readily available, but I can provide it for the work session.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any others? Seeing none, thank you again.
Thank you all very much.
I don't see any other legislators that are before us. I will ask now for the general public that anyone who wishes to speak in support, please raise your hand. We will let you in. And again, I ask that you state your name and your place of residence and the organization that you might be representing.
I see a number of hands. I'm going to bring in the first 3.
Thank you. Thank you. I saw Nathan Wessler, but that really was Mr. Cabetta in disguise, I believe. So, Mr. Cabetta, is that you? No?
Yes.
Okay, who do I have? It says Nathan Wessler.
Yes, I submitted testimony for someone else on another bill, and all the links I got from the committee, the two so far, insist on naming me Nate Wessler.
All right. Well, I recognized you first. Please state your name and your residence and the organization you represent, please.
Thank you, Senator DeChambeau, Representative Warren, and members of the committee. Good morning. My name is Michael Cabetta, not Nate Wessler, and I'm Policy Counsel for the ACLU of Maine. On behalf of our members, I urge you to support this bill because it would strengthen our constitutional rights. Originally created to improve the sharing of anti-terrorism intelligence among different state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies, the scope of Fusion Center's mission has quickly expanded to cover, quote, all crimes and all hazards. The types of information they seek for analysis has also broadened over time to include not just criminal justice intelligence, but also public and private sector data. Participation in Fusion Centers has grown to include not just law enforcement, but also other government entities, the military, and even select members of the private sector, including, as you've heard in Maine, an agent of Central Maine Power. Fusion Centers raise very serious privacy issues at a time when new technology, government powers are combining to pose serious and unprecedented threats to Americans' privacy. There are serious questions about whether data fusion is an effective means of preventing terrorism in the first place, and whether funding the development of these centers is a wise investment of finite public safety resources. In a democracy, the collection and sharing of intelligence information needs to be carried out with utmost care. That's because more and more, the amount of information available on each one of us is enough to assemble a very detailed portrait of our lives. And because security agencies are moving toward using such portraits to profile how suspicious we look. A shroud of secrecy cloaks the MIAC. Last summer, Blue Leaks momentarily removed that shroud. What we saw makes clear that the MIAC is not just ineffective, but also harmful. We learned from a document titled Civil Unrest Daily Report that Maine's Fusion Center was closely surveilling racial justice and other activists from Portland to Presque Isle. In his federal lawsuit against MIAC, State Police Trooper George Loader stated that our Fusion Center has, quote, kept an illegal database of gun owners, illegally conducted surveillance on peace activists, and regularly circumvented federal privacy laws. These are the words of an eyewitness, a whistleblower. As we saw in last week's George Floyd trial, and as you all know from your work in criminal justice, it is no small matter for a police officer to impugn a policing institution. The MIAC is exactly what watchdogs feared it was, a highly secretive threat to fundamental constitutional rights. Our First Amendment rights to assemble, petition our government, and speak freely are among the rights threatened by Maine's Fusion Center. The MIAC has an immigration official in its midst, suggesting that it aids in our country's profoundly harmful practice of separating families through deportation. This bill would safeguard the constitutional rights of people in Maine. I urge you to strengthen our civil liberties and vote to pass. And I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Cabetta. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Cabetta? Seeing none, I will move on. The next one I see is Winifred Tate.
Thank you. I'll go ahead then, if that's okay. Good morning, Senator DeChambeau, Representative Warren, and distinguished members of the committee. I'm here to testify in support of LD 1278, but for a slightly different reason. MIAC is one of the many cities that has expanded its reach to focus on drug interdiction efforts. And more than 50 years of efforts have failed to achieve their goal. Suppressing drug shipments and sales in one area only pushes them into another. These efforts have not achieved our goals of reducing the negative health and economic impacts of opioid and other substance use disorders. As part of my work with the Maine Drug Policy Lab at Colby College, I have interviewed many people like those whose mugshots are circulated by the MIAC. And these are people who are arrested for drug trafficking crimes in Maine, not those convicted. But when I interview people who've been convicted of drug trafficking crimes, I listen to their stories and I find people who are victims of sexual assault and childhood trauma, of untreated mental illnesses, of systemic neglect and mistreatment from the institutions charged with protecting them. These are people charged with drug trafficking because of the amount of drugs they use, because Maine's antiquated drug laws define possession of small quantities of drugs as trafficking, or they're selling drugs to support their habit, to not become dope sick, to quiet the inner torment of anxiety, depression, and despair. We say we can't arrest our way out of this. The problematic drug use is a public health problem, but the money we are spending on failed policing efforts like the MEAC means that we cannot spend that money where it is needed. This year, LD 88, a bill being heard today in the Health and Human Services Committee, asked for $1 million to ensure that there are recovery centers in every county in Maine because we don't have them. Why am I bringing this up? Because we're being told that there's not enough money to fund these centers. LD 1278 would put money back in the general fund, almost $1 million that could go directly into investing in recovery, our communities, and a brighter future for struggling people, not recirculating mugshots of poor people in Maine who are caught up in substance use disorder and find treatment unavailable to them. Maine communities cannot afford to keep funding failed policies. It's time to put our money where our mouth is, to fund recovery supports, public health infrastructure, and invest in communities. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I will note that my comments come from having reviewed these documents that were leaked and are now in public record about the role that the MEAC plays in recirculating kind of publicly available information about selling drugs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tate. Any questions of Ms. Tate? Seeing none, again, thank you. We will then, I will recognize Gina Leduc-Kuntz.
Hi, my name is Gina Leduc-Kuntz. I'm from Freeport, and I'm testifying today in support of LD 1278. And I had never heard of the MIAC until a few months back. I was a member of Mainers Against Mask Mandates. It was not a group started by me, but the group's mission was not necessarily against mask wearing, but against mandates. A member of the group posted a post about going to Hannaford's to encourage fellow non-mask supporters. It was a pretty benign post. It was not an organized protest of any kind. And suddenly we had the MIAC all over the group. I put out some FOIA requests. I was very, very shocked at the level of dissemination that the MIAC had sent through the entire state, to those communities and actually the entire state of Maine, through every police department. And not only was I shocked at the level of mobilization and the level of money being invested into stalking a Facebook group, which was public information that others have testified on, that the MIAC is taking public information and re-disseminating. The reading comprehension of the post was very low, and there was no protest planned. This was misinterpreted at the governor's office by the person who disseminated to the MIAC. The group was continually stalked by the MIAC. They were monitoring the group's movements. They monitored that we may be moving from Facebook to MeWe. Several members were visited by the FBI. We are Maine citizens who are doing nothing illegal, except for maybe we think mask wearing is not the greatest public policy, and we have the right to speak out against that. And we have a right to assembly, we have a right to protest, we have a right to free speech. It's a waste of money. The MIAC is a waste of money. It's not doing its job, which is to protect the United States and to protect Mainers. Senator Lawrence questioned about the January 6th attack and why that wasn't stopped. I would say because people who are in the MIAC are sitting on Facebook, stalking regular citizens on Facebook and not doing their job adequately. So I only have 32 seconds left here. I have not submitted my written testimony yet because I was having some tech difficulties. I can share with you, and I will share with you, those FOIA requests that I received back, and I will write up this testimony in a more clear manner of how this all unfolded and how I became aware of the MIAC. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question from Representative Pluka for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Leduc-Kuntz, for being here today. You mentioned that you were being stalked by MIAC, and could you give us some details of how, in what way you were feeling stalked, or how the stalking was happening? And then also, I was interested in the FBI, and what was the FBI investigating when they visited you?
Well, I was never visited by the FBI, but I know other members have been visited by the FBI, and it would be better if I probably encouraged them to give their testimony and write up their testimony.
That would be great.
So stalking, meaning that they were continually monitoring the group to see if we were going to have protests. They were monitoring our shifts, like I mentioned. From if we were moving from Facebook to MeWe, they were trying to identify the leaders of the group, and they got it wrong all the time. On Facebook, I believe that they've reported my information, like there's been testimony on average citizens being reported out to corporations. I'm pretty sure that I'm on that list, because now I'm having all sorts of problems with Facebook. I'll get blocked, I'll get shut down for nothing. I got a warning the other day for making a very benign comment. I laughed at a meme, and within seconds I was told I violated community standards. So I know I just highly suspect I'm on a list of some kind, and I've only had like one speeding ticket in my life. I wasn't even speeding, but that's a whole different issue. But so like I'm not a terrorist, but somehow I've now made it to I'm some sort of suspected terrorist or something. I should be submitting a FOIA request on my own name to see what they're actually collecting. But I can do that for you. I can ask those people to put in their testimony.
Yes, thank you. Really appreciate seeing their written testimony, as well as any of the documentation you have of the FOIA requests.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? See now and done. Thank you very much, Ms. Leduc.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, in follow-up to that, I just received a notice that Senator Searway's Zoom has shut down. So
I will bring over the next three people: Harrison
Yes,
Kemp,
thank
Joe
you.
Everett, and Brendan McQuaid.
thank you. I will recognize them in order that I've seen them. That's Harrison Kemp, followed by Joe Everett, and then Brendan McQuaid. Mr. Kemp, you may proceed.
Thank you. My name is Harrison Kemp. I am the Legislative Director for the Free Maine PAC, the Vice Chairman for the Libertarian Party of Maine, an Old Town resident, and a veteran of the Afghanistan War. This morning, the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee is deciding whether to uphold the Constitution they swore to protect and defend, or allow the federal and state governments to continue their illegal and unjustifiable use of unwarranted surveillance. I implore the committee to vote ought to pass on this important legislation, which seeks to reestablish the natural right to be secure in your property as codified by both the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution and Section 5 of the Maine State Constitution. The old adage, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, has been spouted by tyrants the world over. And while some of you may be making that argument publicly or privately, I ask, what is the password to your email? What is your bank account information? What's the pet name for your spouse? And if you're uncomfortable sharing this information with those that you claim to represent, why should you expect us to be comfortable giving you this information, along with much more? And furthermore, I ask you, are you ready to support ending the secret classifications of state documents so that people can see what our government is doing at all times? Of course not, because you don't actually believe this old adage. You simply use it to hide your true intent, which is to expand the states and by default your own power. As an elected representative, you swore to uphold the Maine State Constitution. And with that in mind, I remind you that the MIAC engages in unconstitutional information gathering, and that this bill before you today seeks to correct those wrongs. Act with courage. Tell those with vested interest who have been at your door to be gone, for you cannot be bought by them. Tell those lobbying to maintain the status quo that is the people of Maine, not them you represent. Act with courage and do not give in to evil, but pursue ever more boldly against it. I implore you all to vote ought to pass on this important legislation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kemp. Any questions of Mr. Kemp? Seeing none, again, thank you. I now will call upon Joe Everett.
Good morning. Good morning, Senator DeChambeau, Representative Warren, and members of the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. My name is Joe Everett, and I am the CEO of the Opportunity Alliance of LD 1278 this morning. The BHCC is comprised of 8 community-based organizations who provide mental health and substance use and children's all across the state. Why, you may ask, are we testifying on this bill? The stated purpose of the Maine Information Analysis Center is to keep Maine citizens safe from harm. We agree that keeping people safe and healthy is a task of Maine government, but we believe the large allocation of resources assigned to this task is a misdirection of funds. I am here because our community-based mental health system, whose purpose is also to keep Maine citizens safe and healthy, is desperately underfunded. Right now, we need to more effectively address the opioid crisis, the long-term mental health impacts of the COVID pandemic, and to provide the array of services to help people move toward recovery. A large infusion of resources is required to provide the services that are needed. It will also help Maine taxpayers avoid funding the much more expensive and ineffective solutions of sending people with mental health issues to jail or emergency departments. This is much more urgent and pervasive safety need in our community than the current mission of the MIAC. Additionally, I'm here because we must stop thinking of state programs only in silos. Also, the issues of criminal justice, although the issues of criminal justice and mental health are integrally connected, there's rarely an opportunity to examine that relationship and to work out mutually beneficial programs for our citizens. This afternoon, in fact, the collaborative will be testifying in Health and Human Services for more funding for our crisis system so that law enforcement will have help in getting immediate mental health and substance use services for the people they are asked to deal with instead of arresting and putting them in jail. You all know better than I do that money does not grow on trees, and we cannot continue to look at budget issues in strict silos. We have to see the impact programs and funding have on one another across silos. It is hard work. It upsets the traditional apple cart, but we are asking you to have the courage to do this hard work, to work across your silos, to reallocate the funds currently slated for MIAC to the critical needs of the mental health and substance use system. This is action that will truly add to the safety and security of Mainers. Thank you for your consideration, and I will be happy to answer any questions this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Everett. Anyone have a question for Joe Everett? See none. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
I now will recognize Brandon McQuaid.
Senator DeChambeau, Representative Warren, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety. Good morning. My name is Brendan McQuaid. I am an assistant professor in the Criminology Department at the University of Southern Maine and author of the only academic book on fusion centers. My employer takes no position on this subject. I am speaking as an expert on fusion centers, and on this basis, I urge you to support LD 1278. The failures of fusion centers are well established. For years, reports from nonpartisan government auditors, civil libertarian organizations, and the U.S. Senate Permanent Committee of Investigations have all documented the problems and abuses of fusion centers. Last summer, these problems made headlines in Maine when scandals related to a whistleblower complaint in the Blue Leaks hack put an uncomfortable spotlight on the MIAC. While there is much I would like to cover today, I'm going to focus on the way the MIAC harms people by criminalizing them. Put differently, the MIAC is part of a larger system that manages social problems like poverty, homelessness, and untreated mental health issues with police and prisons. On March 17, 2021, DPS Commissioner Michael Sawchuk shared several documents with this committee detailing incidents where the MIAC provided analytic support, or disseminated information about wanted suspects or threatening people. From his perspective, these incidents prove the worth of the MIAC. From my perspective, these documents are testaments to our overdeveloped systems of imprisonment and policing. Fusion centers are the nervous system of mass incarceration. What DPS calls effective information sharing is also mass criminalization. For every document shared by DPS, there are others that show how the MIAC presents people struggling with homelessness, mental illness, or substance use disorder as dangerous threats. Appended to this comment, I have included a different selection of MIAC documents detailing those unfortunate souls that got caught in the MIAC's digital dragnet. These documents are evidence of institutional failures. Instead of proactively helping struggling people, we punish them, effectively blaming individuals for our collective inability to care for each other. More than half of all incarcerated people have untreated mental health issues. 56% of state prisoners, 45% of federal prisoners, 64% of jail inmates. Between 1/4 and 1/2 of people killed by police suffer from severe psychiatric diseases. The MIAC and other fusion centers are part of this problem. Instead of fearing our criminalized sisters and brothers, we should start building a society in which authoritarianism, coercion, and fear do not play a major role in governance. As you know, experts, advocates, and affected communities have been calling for a different approach to public safety, one centered on meeting needs, not criminalizing behaviors. Here, I encourage you to think of LD 1278 alongside other bills under consideration this legislative session that would decriminalize drug possession, cut the budget of the MDEA in half to fund community-based drug treatment, and close Long Creek, among other proposals. This is an opportunity to take bold action and set a new agenda. I hope you will rise to the occasion and pass this first in the nation proposal to close the Fusion Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McQuaid. Ms. McQuaid, I may have been writing something and missed. You're an instructor at what school?
I'm a professor at the University of Southern Maine in the criminology department, an assistant professor.
Okay, thank you very much. I see a few people. I will recognize Representative Reckitt, followed by Representative Pickett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned that you have written the only book on fusion centers in this country. Did you provide a reference for that in your testimony?
Yeah, I included a reference of that in my testimony. The book's called Pacifying the Homeland. It came out in 2019, published by the University of California Press. It's the only academic study on fusion centers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Pickett.
Yes, Madam Chair. Just I don't see the testimony in our queue. So can we make sure that we have the person's testimonies available to us for review, please?
I submitted the testimony. I hope you have it. And after my comment, there's a brief summary, and then I present 11 documents from Blue Leaks that I redacted to remove personal identifying information that shows they're just examples of people with untreated mental illness that and other issues that get monitored by the MIAC.
Madam Chair, I'm looking at the queue and it hasn't arrived there yet. So maybe if our clerk could check on that.
Thank you. I want to clarify something, Mr. McQuaid. You said you also provided other documents to us. Is that what I understood? All right, thank you. Seeing no other questions, again, thank you, Mr. McQuaid, and I'll ask our clerk if there's anyone else that wishes to speak in support of this bill.
There are 3 more hands up. I'll bring over Whitney Parrish, Sandra Howard, and Marnie Ritchie.
Thank you.
And on the subject of testimony, I have heard that the system is being overwhelmed with all the testimony coming in for all the different committees, and there is a little bit of a delay. So just be patient.
Thank you.
I did just look, Representative Pickett, and Professor McQuaid's testimony is now there. If you have trouble, maybe Jane or Deb could send it out, but I just did look and it's there. It may have been delayed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I now will recognize, in order that I saw them come in the room, Whitney Parrish, followed by Sandra Howard, and then Marnie Ritchie. Ms. Parrish, welcome.
Thanks so much. Good morning, Senator DeChambeau, Representative Warren, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Whitney Parrish, and I'm the Advocacy and Communications Director of Health Equity Alliance. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit public health and harm reduction organization that works throughout Maine. Health Equity Alliance is in strong support of LD 1278 because we believe it's time to stop arresting our way out of a public health crisis and start reinvesting in evidence-based practices and solutions and community-based responses to chaotic or problematic substance use. HEAL works directly with people who are in active drug use through the administration of harm reduction services like Maine CDC certified syringe service programs, wraparound care like targeted case management, and law enforcement assisted diversion or LEAD programs in partnership with local police departments. Through our evidence-based and led services, we build non-judgmental, meaningful relationships with community members who use drugs. We support them wherever they're at in their lives, and we support their path to better health, and for many, recovery. It came to my attention in the summer of 2020, as it did for many in the last year and a half, that the MIAC issues monthly statewide opioid arrest bulletins, branded with the seals of both MIAC and the New England High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, or the HIDTA. These bulletins contain page after page of photographs, addresses, and charges, not convictions, charges, many merely for possession of a drug or trafficking with no context provided and no identifiable reason for why these specific individuals were singled out or targeted. The only discernible reason for these bulletins was to distribute this information to every law enforcement agency in the state, putting officers on notice with nothing short of a modern day rogues gallery. It is heartbreaking and impossible to reconcile our claims that we share the goal of treating drug use as a public health and medical issue where people can access the help and support they need, while also knowing we are targeting our community members in the ways the MIAC does through these bulletins and other information. I'm going to skip ahead. You'll have my testimony. These are people with families, with loved ones, with inherent dignity and worth. They're human beings and our neighbors, even if we don't like or understand drug use. It's challenging to believe this activity is an effective or reasonable use of finite financial resources. My friend Jesse Harvey was one of the people targeted by MIAC, and I'd encourage you to look at my testimony to read how. A few months after the bulletins were issued, Jesse died on Labor Day at age 28. At first glance, many would say Jesse died of an overdose. Jesse died of drug poisoning facilitated in part by overcriminalization of drug use. We see this overcriminalization demonstrated by the MIAC by blasting photographs of individuals who have been charged with drug offenses. And I'll wrap up soon. In Jesse's life-saving worth, lauded nationally and internationally, he saw the damage done when we criminalize, treat people as lesser than, and acts as if they are not deserving of safety and dignity. There is no justification for how Jesse and too many others were targeted in this way. Did not bring them closer to health, and it did not keep them alive. I will summarize. There is more testimony if you want to look at it at your leisure. If our shared goal is making our state safer and healthier, it's time for something different. And our fight to save lives and create safety, let's start by ending programs that do just the opposite and invest in ones that have already proven time and again that they work. We urge the committee to vote on to pass on LD 1278. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Senator, you're on mute.
I know, thank you. When she didn't respond, I knew I was muted. Ms. Parrish, your residence, please. So
yes, I live in Hollowell, and I am the Director of Advocacy and Communications for the Health Equity Alliance.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Parrish? Again, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I now will recognize Sandra Howard.
Good morning, Senator DeChambeau, Representative Warren, members of the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. My name is Sandra Howard. I'm the principal officer of the No CMP Corridor PAC and the director of Say No to NECEC, a 501c3 that was formed by concerned citizens to oppose the destructive CMP corridor project. I'm here today to testify in support of LD 1278, an act to end the Maine Information Analysis Center program. In 2018, a group of grassroots activists affiliated with Say No to NECEC participated in a peaceful protest against the corridor at the Augusta State House complex. We obtained the necessary permit for the event, followed all the laws and rules, and went on our way. We've since learned through a whistleblower at the state police that MIAC monitored our protests, collected information on the attendees, and shared that file with Center Maine Power. Coincidentally or not, a CMP representative did serve on the advisory board for MIAC. Dana Connors, president of the Maine Chamber of Commerce, an organization actively supporting the project, also receives information on law-abiding Mainers since he's included on the MIAC email list, which is used to share situational awareness reports. This close coordination between law enforcement and private interests is disturbing, to say the least. Opponents of the CMP corridor have been accustomed to Central Maine Power's shady practices to promote the project. In 2019 and 2020, during our first signature gathering effort, CMP's PAC paid a private investigator to spy on private citizens associated with collecting signatures for the referendum. They also hired a private investigator to follow one of our notaries, looking through her windows, taking photos of her, and contacting her place of employment. He harassed this Maine resident, which is a clear violation of her privacy. Fortunately, the Secretary of State did not give credence to these reports. Also, the company at the beginning of the lockdown order for the beginning of the pandemic paid to have illegitimate subpoenas issued to our volunteers in person, putting them at potential exposure to the virus. This was during a time that was against the governor's executive order. And a few months ago, I had to appear before Maine Ethics after CMP filed a bogus complaint against me, a volunteer, for not disclosing the compensation I must have received. The truly shocking part is that a division of the Maine State Police has provided this foreign-owned utility with video footage and information on law-abiding citizens who've done absolutely nothing wrong. This has also led to the FBI being in touch with me regularly about our grassroots opposition to the corridor. This information sharing extends well beyond the CMP corridor project. It's happening without the knowledge or consent of those being surveilled. We fail to see how this practice is keeping Mainers safe, which is why we urge you, the committee, to support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Ms. Howard, did you say you're from, like, I thought I heard you say Oxford County, or did you say the town you were from?
So Say No to NECEC is a nonprofit out of Caratunk, and the No CMP Corridor PAC is out of Farmington.
Did you say Caratunk?
Yes, up near the Forks.
I'm one of the few people who knows where that is.
Well, that's okay. We'll keep it that way. It's a beautiful area.
Any questions for Ms. Howard? Thank you very much, Ms. Howard, for your testimony. And now I will recognize Dr. Marnie Ritchie. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good morning. My name is Dr. Marnie Ritchie. I actually live in Tacoma, Washington, on the other coast, but my work brings me here today. I am an assistant professor of communication at Pacific Lutheran University, and I speak today in strong support of LD 1278. I am a researcher in the fields of surveillance and security studies, and one of the few experts on fusion centers proper in the country. I'm currently authoring the second book about the National Network of Fusion, and that's based in years of award-winning empirical and recent research since 2017. I speak in favor for two reasons. First, LD 1278 prioritizes the safety of historically underserved populations. And second, it recognizes a truth that fusion cannot be reformed. So first, LD 1278 prioritizes the safety of underserved populations, those who I believe should be the top concern in these deliberations. A whistleblower last May and Blue Leaks show in stark terms that the Maine Center uniquely conflates the work of policing with the marking of bodies as suspect in racial terms. The Maine Center contaminates intelligence with material that manufactures racial threats, which licenses more unwarranted monitoring of non-white Maine residents. Second, throughout my research, I've found that Fusion's very raison d'etre is flawed, and no level of oversight nor bias training will change it. Fusion's impetus is to gather and circulate information based on suspicions. It is a flawed model with a deficient understanding of the full context that characterizes useful intelligence. Finally, I applaud the committee for really leading the way here, for doing what no other representative body has yet done. You have made Fusion a matter of public concern, one that is responsive to people. Formalizing an end to an already failed program allows us to actually have conversations about what keeps residents safe, and we should applaud the potential that a deallocation could lead to a better and more verifiably useful public safety outcome in the future. And I just want to note here that in my written testimony, I did append some of my research on this matter that's been published, so you can look for that. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Anyone have any questions for Dr. Ritchie? I appreciate your testimony, Dr. Ritchie. Thank you very much. All right. We have any more that wish to speak in support?
No more hands up. I think we got them all.
Right. I will now call upon those who wish to speak against the bill. If you would raise your hand, please, I will recognize you.
I see Commissioner Soschuk, Sheriff Morton, and Michael Johnston.
Thank you.
Actually, Sheriff Troy Morton just coming in too.
Thank you. Welcome, Commissioner Soschuk.
Good morning, Senator. Nice to see everybody. I know you've got a long day ahead of you, so I appreciate your patience and all of your work. So thank you very much. Senator DeChambeau, Representative Warren, and other distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety. My name is Commissioner Mike Soschuk, and I'm here to represent the Maine Department of Public Safety to testify in opposition of LD 1278. This bill would terminate the Maine Information and Analysis Center, better known as MIAC, which would adversely impact public safety in Maine by weakening our ability to receive, analyze, share information, and to better coordinate efforts between our federal, state, local, tribal, territorial, and private sector partners. Fusion centers are authorized by federal law, and each state has at least one fusion center operating within their jurisdiction, although some states, like Massachusetts, have more than one. There's a total of 80 fusion centers nationwide. In Maine, our fusion center is known as the MIAC and was first established by executive order in 2006 by then Governor Baldacci. This national network of fusion centers is critically important as it allows for the sharing information related to threats in real time across geographical and jurisdictional boundaries, which we know criminals do not respect or honor. The MIAC represents a shared commitment between the federal government and the state and local governments who own and operate the centers. Individually, each is a vital resource for integrating information from national and local sources to prevent and respond to all threats and hazards. The enhanced collaboration between the federal government, state, local, and private sector partners represents the standard through which we view public safety and homeland security. Fusion centers play a key role in homeland security and public safety pursuant to the United States Homeland Security Act by protecting local communities from violent crime and other criminal threats through their daily operations. This involves gathering, analyzing, and sharing threat information and suspicious activity reports on a variety of threats and crimes, including but not limited to violent crime, child abuse, human trafficking, domestic violence, cybersecurity, election security, property crime, missing persons, critical infrastructure protection, public health threats, and of course, domestic violent extremism. As analytical hubs, fusion centers provide a single point of contact for information sharing and are uniquely situated to empower frontline personnel to understand the local implications of national intelligence by tailoring national threat information into a local context and helping frontline personnel understand while also protecting the privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties of individuals in their communities. The concept of information sharing is not new in law enforcement and public safety. It builds upon the information-led policing concept that has been applied with great success for some time by law enforcement agencies across the country. This information sharing process is crucial to ensuring that those charged with protecting our communities are better informed and our people and institutions will be better protected. Public safety is improved when law enforcement, public safety, and private sector partners at the federal, state, and local level are sharing information and coordinating efforts. History has taught us the disastrous and deadly consequences that come from the failure to share information. Failures by public safety and government agencies to adequately prevent, mitigate, and respond to violence and crime can often be traced to a breakdown in information sharing and a lack of communication. Certainly happy to take any questions. There's another paragraph on the end there that I cut off, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I see Representative Pluker has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You referenced a couple times to your private sector partners. Is that a list of the private sector partners? Could you provide that to the committee?
Certainly, yeah, happy to.
Great, thank you. And then if I could follow up, Madam Chair.
Go right ahead, thank you.
The sponsor of the bill mentioned in her introduction that she asked the question of how many investigations of non-criminals are carried out, or what percentage of the activity of MIAC is concerned with that. Have you been able to answer that question since she last asked it?
I'm not sure if the good representative asked it or not over the summer. It was during that lengthy hearing, and it was the percentage of time that the MIAC spent reviewing material from those that are not associated with criminal activity. And no, I cannot answer that question. If you're looking for 2% of the time versus 3% of the time versus 1.5%, then no, I cannot. I can, as I did that day, speak to the reality behind information sharing and the reality that the MIAC is not an investigative entity. It is not actively investigating these scenarios. It is an information sharing platform. And as a piece of that, the examples that I gave are essentially around protest activity or civil unrest, completely own that fact. And the reality is that we find out that there's going to be a group that's coming to town in a particular area to protest some activity, and we've tried to reach out to the organizers or that group just to say, hey, when are you coming? How many people are coming? Can we help you? Can we help facilitate your First Amendment right? How can we make you safer that particular day? If we can't get communication, then we're going to go to a public-facing social media account as an example and say, so I've heard that there's going to be an event on a Tuesday. We can't find out exactly what that is or who's coming or where they're going to be or what they're going to do. So we go to that public-facing page and we review that material so that we can say, all right, we've got 300 people coming versus 3. This is their intent. They're going to march in the street versus stay on the sidewalk. And none of those things are set in stone, but they certainly give us the information that's imperative to help facilitate their First Amendment right, which is our primary goal, while making them and others as safe as humanly possible. So no, I don't have an exact percentage for you about the number of time that we do that, or the percentage of time rather that we do that work. But that's really what's happening behind the scenes here. So I apologize if that answer is not sufficient, sir.
No, could I follow up, Madam Chair? I don't know if there's other folks with questions.
There are others, but you may ask a follow-up question.
Okay, so and with investigations, it sounds like there is some level of investigation if you're going onto Facebook and finding information, or you're calling people and asking for information. But I understand that can be nebulous. But how about do you keep track of convictions that come out of the work that MIAC does?
No, I think that the other issue that we found is, as has been mentioned in previous testimony, it is certainly difficult to prove a negative, right? When you're talking about information sharing, I know that folks would love for us to say we put out 300 situational awareness bulletins and we got 210 arrests from that information. I don't believe information sharing works that way. That has not been our experience. However, I think what we've heard repeatedly are the questions about, give us the examples of how this works. I know that Lieutenant Johnston, who will be testifying immediately after me, as well as some of our other partners today, will be talking about the examples of how the MIAC was effective for them. And some of those cases, probably the best cases and best examples to me, are keeping people safe, whether that's a missing person. That we have a very, very recent example from just last week that Lieutenant Johnston will refer to. And then there are different scenarios where sure we do make arrests based on the information that are shared. I say we as in our partnerships with others make arrests. So I think Maine sheriffs, Maine chiefs, the other entities that are going to speak today will provide some of those examples. Again, I would look at myself as a data guy at this point, but we're not going to be able to say the 300 versus this and this is the percentage. But we will give you examples that I think you can picture in your own communities and how information sharing is so important for our overall mission.
Thank you. And a final question on a different point, Madam Chair.
Could we come back to that, Mr. Pluker?
Of course, thank you.
Keep you okay in the loop. I now have Representative Costain, followed by Representative Lookner, Representative Renecki, and we'll go back to Representative Pluker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning,
I would like to ask you a question about, we've heard a lot today about the lawsuit that was going on, and I know part of that you can't talk about, but is there anything that you can update us on or anything there as far as the lawsuit that everybody's mentioned this morning?
Yeah, I do appreciate that. I did hear a lot about people that learned about this in the news as if it was factual. If that was it, that was evidence that this had occurred because they read it in the Press Herald or the BDN. So I do appreciate the opportunity to address that, sir. I will say, however, that I do have about a paragraph, a snippet here from the Attorney General's office because a couple of these counts are still active. But I'll read this verbatim for information. I think it's very clarifying for where we currently stand with that particular matter. So the Attorney General's office generally advised against publicly discussing pending litigation. While that still applies, we can say that all of the counts you moved to dismiss were dismissed. And you continue to dispute the counts that remain in the case. As you may remember, or people learned in the media, there were 6 initial counts in this whistleblower, with air quotes, allegation. 4 of those counts have since been dismissed. All 4 counts that we asked and we worked with the AG's office to dismiss have in fact been dismissed. I think it would also be fair to say that the 2 counts that remain in the case concern specific allegations about the plaintiff's employment at the state police, and all of the counts alleging that the MIAC violated federal and state law with respect to how it treats information about Maine citizens were dismissed. Again, all of the accounts alleging that the MIAC violated federal and state law with respect to how it treats information about Maine citizens were dismissed. Now, you haven't read that because I haven't read it in the story either in the Press Herald or the BDN. So I'm not sure why that is, but that's the reality of where we are today. And while I'm very, very confident that the remaining 2 counts are going to be dismissed as well, I would describe those as employee-style complaints against their employer and having nothing to do with the MIAC violating federal or state law. So I really do appreciate that question, sir.
Follow up, ma'am.
Yes, go right ahead.
So is that something that you could send us?
Yeah, sure.
So that we could have that statement that the AG sent.
I think we can even send, because I don't believe anybody in the court process requested that this entire document be confidential in nature. So I'll check in with the AG's office, and there's a potential there. We can send you the entire motion to dismiss and the results of that, and certainly the information that I just gave you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so I just to clarify, so what's left in the lawsuit is basically personnel issues, is what you're saying, nothing to do with MIAC.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did I say that I was going to recognize? Yes, Representative Lookner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Suschuk. So I'm kind of wondering, have there been any thwarted terrorist activities in the state of Maine in the last, has the state police or any local law enforcement agency had managed to thwart a suspected criminal, or excuse me, a terrorist plot in the state in the last 20 years?
I'm happy to take a look at that with our partners at the federal level, with the FBI, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the others that we work with, to see what I'm allowed to say regarding that. And that'll get me in trouble with this group as well. But the reality is I'm not sure exactly what I can say or what I can't say, but I'm happy to look into that question directly and bring that information back at the workshop for you, sir.
Terrific, I appreciate that. And just another question, if I may.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. So I assume when either the state police or local law enforcement agency brings a case, somebody, there's a violent protest, say, and a case is brought against that individual who's perpetrating that specific crime. I assume there's some sort of tracking about in that case about like where that, the information came from. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess to lead in, I guess let me go back to your first question and I'll evolve over to this one. Is that I do want us to go back as a
An
state and look at January 17th.
brings a case, somebody
in the state of Maine, specific to us. And while I won't go into the numbers of individuals that were involved in the preparation work that we did in Maine, I can't speak for January 6th and what occurred there with information sharing or a lack thereof. I can tell you that the MIAC really served a central role in our abilities in Maine to keep Mainers safe and to keep our state capital safe. And the coordination work, I was involved in those conversations. I'm in part of those briefings. And the first people we go to is the MIAC. Can you give us some situational awareness of where we are in Maine today? In that particular instance, January 7th and 20th, what did we learn nationally about some of the things that occurred in other states? What can we utilize for information here to better set ourselves up for success? So those kind of things are discussed on a regular basis. Again, did we have a problem on the 17th and the 20th? No, we did not. Is that all the response? Is the MIAC the sole reason that occurred? No, it's not. But is it a central role in sharing information across all entities to make us safe? It absolutely is. Now, to go on to your second point, sir, depending on the case, you have reports and we're documenting how we got information. If you're talking about somebody being arrested, these are cases that are going to go through the court system and things are going to be combed through to find out exactly how information came to the awareness of the officers involved. And that process is extensive and governed by case law and the Constitution, and all of those things are in play when we talk about criminal prosecutions anywhere, certainly in the state of Maine.
That makes sense. And I just have one last question.
One last question. Okay.
Yeah, I would just like to see for the work session if there's any way that DPS or local law enforcement, could provide just, personalized case information, de-identified case information on just how many cases are brought in the state of Maine by DPS that have information that was, somehow facilitated through my act? That would be really helpful for me.
Happy to take a look at that, sir. Again, I don't think system-wide that's information we're going to be able to quantify for you, but I'm happy to make another run at that and see if we can come back with something that's quantifiable. And I think on the quality side, right, you look at that and you hear the example that Lieutenant Johnson is going to give you about a 16-year-old missing girl from last week, and you determine the value of that in coordination with information sharing amongst entities within the state and out of the state. It's certainly very, very difficult to prove value, if you will. And you're not looking for, that's not what you said. You're asking for numbers and data, which I can certainly appreciate, and we'll try to provide the best that we can.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Winnicki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I have more of a curiosity question. Can a resident ask and receive information about themselves from MIAC that you might have in your possession?
Yes, they can. And there's actually a process that's on the website. And we can also provide that in the workshop as well, exactly what that process looks like. It's just sending us some basic information. This is who I am. This is what I want. We can look and see what we have. And then there's a process to that as well. So happy to provide that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will now go back to Representative Pluka for his question, and then Senator Seaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I haven't seen the executive order that formed MIAC in 2006. Does it explicitly mention terrorism?
Sorry, I do have that right here.
Oh, great.
And we can, it may be better, sir, for me to provide that for the workshop as well. That's a 2-pager. Go ahead.
Yeah. And then the follow-up was if there's any documentation within the state police of when MIAC kind of moved away from specifically working on terrorism issues and made it had a broader scope of work. If there was any deliberation process that could be there was documentation of, love to see it.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Seaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I was in law enforcement, and I know I used it several times in bomb threats, situations, missing persons, and solved a lot of situations that prevented harm. And I just was going to ask you, how would, public safety is number one, and that's we serve and protect. And how would you describe how crippling this would be to our state if this was taken out? I mean, for the crime that that we kind of depend on trying to solve and help the public.
Yeah, sure. I do think that this is critically imperative to public safety in the state of Maine. I say that you don't see me very often in front of this committee to testify on specific bills, but yet here I am today because I do believe that this particular program, this initiative, is incredibly important for our system. And you'll hear these examples. You'll hear from our partners to follow about why they believe it's so important. For me, I can say that again, when you look at domestic violent extremism, and I know that the focus of many folks that have testified to this point is on the terrorism angle and how the fusion centers are plugged into that. That domestic violent extremism in the United States of America, not across the seas, not in war-torn countries, right here in our backyard, has been designated as the #1 threat by the FBI and our federal partners for the last several years. So to think that there would be 80 fusion centers spread across the country that are geared to share information back and forth in a fluid, in a timely manner, and have the state of Maine be a gaping black hole for the lack of information sharing is scary. It's certainly scary for me, and it should be scary for you. I think that when you have 163 police departments in the state of Maine, Probably 5 or 6 of those agencies actually have crime analysts themselves. They have their own crime analysts. That means there's 157, 156, something like that, police departments that do not have the abilities or the capabilities through no fault of their own, based solely on size and resource allocation, to do this coordination work around crime, as an example, and even at the terrorist level. They don't have that capability. And the Fusion Center provides that capability for us as a state. And to lose that information sharing and the opportunity to vet information as it comes in, I think it would be a major, major detriment to all of our communities and the communities that you serve and the state that we all serve.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Anyone else? I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to have to preface it, and I should have put bullet points as I was listening, but I wrote it down. I've looked into this since I first heard of it, and thanks to Representative Warren, who mentioned it last year. And so we look at 2006, where there was an executive order. And then I looked that up, and there was an advisory group, a very prominent advisory group. Dana Connors was, and still is, very well known. Justice Swatham is terrific. And Charlie Ledbetter, you can't ask for 3 better people that were named on that. However, they did not meet since almost ever. And there was an allegation by a member of MIAC, and this is now, there was a lawsuit, but that was the previous administration. I look upon you, Commissioner, as someone who's has a long history in law enforcement, was chief of the largest city in the state, also has worked in municipal administration. And we learned when we first interviewed you, you're a veteran. Given that you were a receiver of MIAC information as a police chief, and now you are the commissioner overseeing MIAC, you were appointed commissioner 2019 after these allegations somewhat occurred, I would believe. I'm interested, and I would like the public to know, what is it that you have addressed with MIAC within your own capacity as commissioner to make it more accountable prior to even the front page reports? But could you share that with us, please?
Yeah, sure. And let me just preface my comments by saying that the Maine State Police and the command staff, the colonel, his team, the commanders of the MIAC, currently Lieutenant Johnston, they had these changes in the works long before I arrived. And I say that because they deserve that credit. And they put a lot of work into the bylaws and the privacy statement and privacy policy, reviewing national standards and the advisory board, the makeup of that board. And really, when I came in as the commissioner here in early 2019, there certainly had been some conversations previously from a statewide perspective about the MIAC. The lawsuit occurred after the fact, but I really came in and sat down with an incredibly honorable group of folks that looked at best practices from a new administrative lens and said, okay, so are we doing the best we can, or can we evolve this into a new program, a new system, and is that necessary? And I think the answer was yes, sure, it's necessary. We are constantly evolving as an industry, as a profession, as a calling, and this is just one